Investors wondering how the Iran war could impact future rate cuts. Also in focus, GOP Senator Thom Tillis not backing down from his vow to block Fed nominees until the DOJ ends its probe into Jay Powell, but saying he thought it was going to, I don't know, paraphrasing, going to work out one way or another. Joining us now, Judy Shelton, Independent Institute senior fellow. Judy, I think you probably look at the building and maybe the Jay Powell's reaction to questions about it and think that it wasn't great. I think I've seen your comments about that, but you have much bigger problems with Jay Powell's tenure since he's been Fed chairman in relation to the dollar.
Well, I think right now he's just being petulant because he didn't like being asked by the Department of Justice to provide more information on those cost overruns. And in spite of his insistence that no one's above the law and no one respects more deeply the need to be accountable to the American people and to Congress, Fed Chair Powell just said, this shouldn't apply to me. This is just about monetary policy. So precisely because I am chairman of the Fed, I do not have to respond or be under rule of law, which is administered in our country through the Department of Justice. And now I see senators on the Senate Banking Committee feeling they have to walk on eggshells to appease Chair Powell. And by bringing up the war and how that complicates monetary policy going forward, this is precisely why Chair Powell should be testifying, as he is required to do twice a year.
Okay, we froze here. We'll see whether we can get Judy back. Because, all right, you're good. Judy, we got frozen there for a second. Let me just ask you this. So, in your view, if he had to account maybe for the Fed policy decisions, maybe he'd rather talk about the cost overruns. Because you point out, in a person's lifetime, if we shoot for 2% yearly inflation, how much does the dollar lose in value over a person's lifetime? It's like 80% or something, isn't it? Or some horrific number.
Yes.
And during Powell's tenure, it's 29% or something in his tenure.
Right. So that's even if the Fed hit their target of deliberate 2% debasement, a dollar 80 years from now over a person's lifespan would only be worth 21 cents. So the debasement of purchasing power in our unit of account is horrendous. It's far from what the founders had in mind, because the Fed accepts that perpetual inflation should be part of their strategy. And under Powell, since he came in February 2018, during those 8 years, the cumulative inflation is 29%. So that's better than a 3% debasement every year. And it's a shame that we're now focusing on the cost overruns, which I do think showed mismanagement and bad judgment. And instead, we should have Congress focused on what it means to ensure a trustworthy unit of account, what it means to have an unvarying monetary standard, which is what they are constitutionally required to carry out as far as their oversight of the regulation of money.
I remember I was arguing with Mohammed El-Arian. He's saying, well, 3.5. And I go, well, 2%, that's like 50% higher if we were to move the goalposts. And he said something like, oh, that 2% comes from New Zealand or something. Where did we? Should it be zero? I mean, we don't. If it's zero and it goes below zero sometime, it goes above zero a little bit. No one, that doesn't sound great. We can't ever really strive for zero, can we? Where do we get 2%? And do you have a problem with that part of the mandate?
I do. I mean, it was invented. It did come from New Zealand, and they finally said, we've had such bad inflation that let's make the next chairman of our central bank have a contract where he says what he can bring inflation down to. And if he achieves that, he gets to keep his job. And if he doesn't, he's fired. And so they set a target of 0 to 2%. That nobody gets fired at the Fed when we hit a CPI of 8.3% in August of of 2022. And when the Fed first tried to figure out what it meant, this mandate of stable prices, Alan Greenspan thought it could mean nothing except zero inflation. It can't mean perpetual inflation or even stable inflation. It had to mean zero. And the head of the New York Fed at the time thought only Congress could give us an appropriate inflation rate target. All this legislation where the Fed is so sanctimonious, coming out of 1977, the Federal Reserve Reform Act, and 1978, what we call Humphrey-Hawkins. This was during the Jimmy Carter era. You had Arthur Burns had been the chair of the Fed since 1970 to 1978. And the Fed picks and chooses what it wants to follow. But in saying that their mandate includes stable prices and then redefining that to mean stable inflation of 2%, deliberate debasement, is really something that's where Congress should be focused on. Instead, Senator Tillis, who I've long respected, is ready to go to the ramparts to defend the wholly discretionary powers of central bankers, to rig the interest rate to be artificially higher or lower than what a free market would decide, and to lock in this deliberate debasement of the dollar so that it loses purchasing power every year.
How do you think Kevin Warsh will approach it? And Judy, in the past, I think you haven't necessarily been someone that wants really restrictive rates that maybe most people would think would have been necessary to keep inflation below target or below 2%. You look for supply side answers and I guess growth. And I don't even know if you necessarily think that growth is inflationary in the first place.
That's the problem. The Fed's models believe that what they do to curtail inflation is to cut off growth and to decrease demand. And I think that's the wrong way. What you want to do is increase supply. And you don't increase supply by making the cost of borrowing more expensive. How are people who are owners of businesses supposed to expand their productive capabilities and increase output if it's prohibitively expensive to borrow the money to do that? I like Kevin. What I like about Kevin Warsh is he gave a speech last April before the IMF, and he said that granting boundless power to government agencies to solve world problems does not square with his disposition. He said if economic institutions want to be trusted, they have to be trustworthy. And to be trustworthy, they have to prove that they are competent. So I think that's the right approach.
Oh, sorry, but since we're going to leave that up for the entire interview, economic impact of the Iran war, and since you haven't said a word about it yet, can you not make us look stupid for having it up? What do you think the economic impact of the Iran war will be on all these things?
Well, it's almost inappropriate to speculate because it's so dependent on how long it lasts and what the impact is on energy costs. But again, that's precisely, here we have Powell refusing to testify before Congress and to give us the Fed's thinking about whether the impact of potentially much higher energy prices will cause them to raise rates to protect against inflation, according to their models, or will they see weakness in the economy that needs to be combated by reducing interest rates?